Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Commander deck techs. I'm releasing a new TMNT Commander deck every Thursday through mid-April when Secrets of Strixhaven drops, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. Hey, it's the Turtles, and we're going to have fun with it. So if you have a request for a specific TMNT Commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Raph and Mikey Troublemakers, the choleric and sanguine members of the Turtles 4-temperament ensemble. As with last week's Dawn and Leo deck, linked in the video's description, this is one of the many team-up cards that depicts each turtle with one of their brothers. And like last week, I'm skipping the little lore dump I like to do in my videos at this point because, come on, it's Raph and Mikey, we know these dudes. I'm excited to show you what I put together for this pair, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card, and this one is pretty darn cool, and why I put it in the command zone, so I put about 30 cards toward doing whatever it asks of me. In this deck, it's a little bit of an interesting mix, but it still works out. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers to clear the board when it's needed, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. We've got a little bit more in this deck than normal, because big creatures. Because this lets me make sure I hit my land drops so I can cast my spells and play the game. So let's talk about our team-up commander. Raph and Mikey Troublemakers is a 7/7 legendary mutant ninja turtle for 5 and double Gruul mana, so we can either spend 5 and double red, 5 and double green, or 5 a red and a green to cast it. It has trample and haste, and whenever it attacks, we reveal the top card of our library, and we keep doing that until we reveal a creature card. We put that card onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and the rest of the cards we revealed onto the bottom of our library in a random order. So if you are new to Magic, welcome! I'm going to go over the ideas this deck is built around in this video, both in terms of the mechanics and the way it plays at the table. And then I'll go through each card individually and talk about how it works and why it helps our game plan. If you have questions, post them in the comments. So this commander, I believe, is just so Michelangelo coded. It wants us to do big green things, not just by including big and probably green creatures in our deck, but also by ramping as hard as we can so that we can play out our 7-mana commander a turn or 3 early. It's also Mikey coded because this kind of red-green play pattern is all about having fun. We flip the top of our deck until we hit something exciting and impactful, and it's already attacking when it lands. A stompy strategy is some of the most fun you can have in the combat phase, so why don't we go all in on it? The only creatures I've put in our deck are ones that make a difference in combat. We only have one creature that costs less than 4 mana, and she's a 4-power indestructible. In fact, the only creature with less than 4 power is another Raphael card, who gives all of our attacking creatures double strike. And things only go up from there, from creatures that eat our opponent's permanents, to creatures that pump our entire team, to creatures that are just massive beaters, ready to help our 7/7 trampling commander smash our opponent's boards and faces. Our plan is the most Michelangelo I could make it. We keep a hand with acceleration. After all, what's a skateboard without a ramp? And we get our commander out as fast as we can. Then we choose an opponent and we ruin their day. The creatures our commander cascades into stick around after they're snuck out to attack, so it's easy to keep the pressure on. Our opponents are forced to decide between removing our commander to turn off the faucet of our big creatures, which means they still have to deal with the remaining creatures that we have in play, or cut down the things we find and leave the tap running. And since we don't have to pay to cast our creatures when we're spinning into them with Raph and Mikey, we can use our mana to cast other spells each turn. We give our creatures trample or endless counters, draw so many cards we might as well be playing blue, use removal spells to clear the path for our fast-moving attackers, or even just keep ramping to ensure we can replay our hasty commander if the need arises, or hard cast a big threat post-combat just to see our opponent's plans fall apart. So where does Raphael fit into this Sistine Chapel of our combat strategy? Well, our commander's ability is akin to sneak attack, which lets us put a creature from our hand directly into play. Sneak attack, huh? Well, since sneak is a new mechanic, we've got a few bonus ways of doing it, even outside of our commander's attack trigger. Ramp sure is important for casting spells, but just putting our permanents into play saves us time and money better put toward pizza. This deck has no breaks. That is, other than our opponent's broken defenses and hopes. We don't have to mulligan that aggressively to get a hand that can launch our commander onto the battlefield fast, and then we don't slow down until everyone's dead. There are some sweet skateboard tricks we can pull off in the process, but for the most part, this deck is as straightforward as it is crazy fun to pilot. I can't emphasize enough what a guaranteed good time this playstyle can be, elegant in simplicity. No need for meticulous bookkeeping, or complicated stack interactions, or a million little triggers. Just a wild grin and a playmat full of creatures turned sideways. When our friends invite us to Commander Night, they'll know exactly what we're about when we answer, Cowabunga it is. You'll enjoy this deck if you know aggro is still a solid strategy in Commander, or if you love the feeling of being a true Gruul player, spending your entire game either glorying in the combat phase or preparing for the next one. So as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over in the video today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, below the deck list, you will see a considering section, filled with cards that I thought about putting in this deck and ultimately decided against. But if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you have a different idea and for the emphasis you want to do on your own version of this deck, maybe you want to go harder into extra combats than I did, or if you just want to get some ideas, it's a great place to start when you build your own Raph and Mikey Troublemakers deck. So we're going to start with the most fun part of this. It's our big hits. These are all of our cards that are either 4 mana or 4 power or do a lot for us in combat. These are the things we want to hit from our commander. As you see, there's only 24 of them, but that's because we wanted to build more room into our deck for additional acceleration, which we'll see more of later. And we have other things to do beyond just combat, but this is the most fun part, so this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with Klothys, God of Destiny. I love this card. This is a red and a green for a 4/5 legendary enchantment creature, God, with Indestructible. That says as long as our devotion to red and green is less than 7, Klothys isn't a creature. Now I want to make sure everyone understands what devotion is. Devotion means you look at all the permanents you have in play and you count up the colored pips on them. That is your devotion to those respective colors. So for example, if we had these 8 cards in play, we would have a devotion to green of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a devotion to red of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a total devotion to red and green of 13. Klothys cares about red plus green, so we just have to count up to 7 for that. If we don't have that when Klothys is in play, that's okay. Klothys isn't a creature and is just a legendary enchantment, but it still has Indestructible. It can't attack or block, obviously, because it's not a creature, but it still has Indestructible and still has this text, which is, at the beginning of our first main phase, exile target card from a graveyard. It doesn't have to be our graveyard. If that card was a land card, we add a red or a green to our mana pool. We just get to have that at the start of our first main phase. Otherwise, if it was anything other than a land that we exile, we gain 2 life, and Klothys deals 2 damage to each opponent. So a free shock to each of our opponent's faces, or a little bit of ramp, and we can choose depending on what has ended up in the graveyard. A lot of the time, it's not going to be a land because it'll be a creature, because we will have been attacking with all of our stuff, and our opponents will be blocking, so their stuff's going to the graveyard. One last note about Devotion. There are some cards in this deck that maybe you're not familiar with how hybrid mana works. So our commander has red and green hybrid mana. This is 1 mana, a red or a green. So it counts toward this red and green devotion, but it only counts 1 toward it. It's not like 5 and double Gruul counts toward 2 red and 2 green. It's 2 mana that are red and green, but it's just a total of 2 mana, so it only contributes 2 devotion to Klothys' calculation. We'll see more of that later on in the video. Next up is Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma. Love Goreclaw. 3 and a green for a 4/3 legendary bear that says creature spells we cast with power 4 or greater cost 2 generic less to cast. So Goreclaw being in play means our commander can come out faster. It means that if our commander dies and has to be cast again, this discount kind of takes care of the first instance of commander tax we have to pay. Very strong. And whenever Goreclaw attacks, each creature we control with power 4 or greater gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. That includes Goreclaw herself. So if she attacks, she becomes a 5/4 trample in the process. Now I know you're wondering, well, this says creature spells, right? What if Klothys wouldn't be a creature when Klothys lands on the battlefield. That's okay. Klothys is a creature with an ability that stops Klothys from being a creature once it's in play. But when you cast Klothys, you're casting a creature spell because the word creature is right there in the type. So Goreclaw will discount Klothys. However, it won't discount Klothys more than 1 mana, even though Goreclaw can discount spells with power 4 or greater by 2, because Goreclaw only discounts the amount of colorless mana, or generic mana rather, that is in the cost. Klothys only has 1 generic in the cost, so with Goreclaw in play, Klothys costs a red and a green, but not less than that. So that's Goreclaw. Very nice. Great piece of ramp for us, as is Hulking Raptor. 2 and double green for a 5/3 dinosaur with word 2 that says at the beginning of our first main phase, we just add 2 green to our mana pool. We just have it there. Great. It's sitting there helping us out. That's extra mana every turn. Now that's only 2 mana in a turn, whereas Goreclaw can discount multiple things in a turn. So maybe Goreclaw is better for us, in 1 turn, but Hulking Raptor gives us green mana we can spend on anything we want. We just have to do it during our first main phase. So pretty nice on top of a 5/3 creature that protects itself. Next we have our first instance of Michelangelo outside of the command zone. 3 and a green for a 4/4 legendary mutant ninja turtle, we have Michelangelo Improviser, which says when he deals combat damage to a player, we can put a creature card and or a land card from our hand onto the battlefield. This is that sneak attack I was talking about. It's the same thing that our commander is doing, but it requires us to do damage with this Michelangelo rather than just attack the way our commander does. That's okay. We've got a way to get in there a little more easily with Michelangelo's sneak ability. For 2 and double green, which is a little bit more restrictive than the regular casting cost, we can sneak Michelangelo in, which means during the declare blockers step, if one of our attacking creatures is not blocked, we can cast Michelangelo for his sneak cost, put him into the battlefield tapped and attacking by returning one of our unblocked attackers to our hand. Now this has to be during the declare blockers step, and our attacker cannot be blocked, even by something that they would have killed. But if they're unblocked after blocks have been declared, and we've got the 2 and a green and Michelangelo's in our hand, we can put him into play and bounce that other creature. Mikey's tapped and attacking. We know he's not being blocked because it's after the chance that our opponent has had to block things. So he's going to deal combat damage to a player, and we're going to get to put something into play. It might be a land, which means this is sort of a ramp piece. But it might be a creature card, and it might even be that same creature that we bounced with Sneak. So it's like we're getting Mikey into play for free and untapping that other creature. Seems pretty good to me. Now, I do want to make it clear for players who are not used to legendary creatures in Magic that it says whenever Michelangelo deals combat damage to a player, the word Michelangelo in this rules text really means whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player. Our commander is Raph and Mikey. That is the character Michelangelo, and even if the name of the card was Raphael and Michelangelo, this ability only triggers when this Michelangelo does combat damage to a player, not when any Michelangelo does. So yeah, anytime a card refers to itself by name, you can replace the words this creature with it. Only refers to that game object of a creature, not some other object as well with the same name, just so you know. Next up is Parapet Thrasher. This is a dragon, good grief. A 4/3 flying dragon for 2 and double red that says whenever one or more dragons we control deal combat damage to an opponent, including itself, we choose one of the following that hasn't been chosen this turn. Destroy an artifact that an opponent controls. This creature deals 4 damage to each other opponent, so not the opponent that was dealt damage by the dragon. Or exile the top card of our library and we may play it this turn. So it's sort of drawing us a card. It's breathing fire on the opponents that were not damaged by our dragons, or we're blowing up an artifact. Now, it's notable the way this is written. Whenever one or more dragons we control deal combat damage to an opponent. So if we have 10 dragons all doing damage to one opponent, we still get to only choose one, because that's one or more dragons. But it's to an opponent. If we have 2 dragons and they each deal damage to different opponents, then that's when we would get to choose more than one of these. We'd get to choose blow up an artifact and burn the opponents that aren't getting burned, that haven't already been damaged by the dragon who triggered this ability. It's also possible to get multiple triggers of this in the same turn with extra combats, but it sure does work if we have multiple dragons all doing damage to different opponents. Just worth noting. Next, we have our other Raphael for the deck, which I mentioned earlier on. 2 and double red for a 2/3 Legendary Mutant Ninja Turtle with Sneak for 1 and a red. So pretty similar to the way that Michelangelo Improviser works, but instead of 3 and a green and Sneak for 2 and double green, it's 2 and a red and Sneak for 1 and double red. So slightly cheaper and no less restrictive. Pretty good. And he gives attacking creatures we control double strike. So if we sneak him in, he is now tapped and attacking, per the rules of Sneak, so he will also have double strike, as well as anything else we have. And since this is post blockers, we might now be eating our opponent's blockers and not dying to them, having our creatures not die to them. Pretty sweet. Next up is Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest from Bloomborough. 3 and double red for a 5/5 legendary bird dragon. So this is another dragon. As far as Parapet Thrasher cares, it's one of our other dragons. I think we have a total of 3 dragons in the deck. Yeah. It's a 5/5 flyer that says whenever it attacks or enters or attacks, we exile the top X cards of our library, where X is the number of creatures we control with power 4 or greater. That's all but one of our creatures. We may then play those cards until our next end step. We have permission to. And at the beginning of our next end step, Dragonhawk deals 2 damage to each opponent for each of those cards that are still exiled. So the idea is we'll exile a bunch of cards from our library, and we have access to those cards until our end step. At our end step, those cards will just stay in exile forever, but we still get value out of them because Dragonhawk does 2 damage to each opponent for each of those cards. We didn't get to cast them, so they're turned into a shock that hits everyone. That seems pretty great. Evercoat Ursine is next from the Bloomborough Commander deck. I really like this card. This is 4 and a green for a 6/5 elemental bear with trample. It has Hideaway 3 twice. So what that means is when it enters, we look at the top 3 cards of our library and we hide one of them face down underneath this bear. The others go on the bottom of our library in a random order. So we'll do that, pick one of those 3, hide it under the bear, put the other 2 on the bottom. And then we do that all again because it Hideaway 3s twice. So now it's got 2 cards under it. Face down, exiled, underneath it. What does that matter? Well, when it deals combat damage to a player, if there are cards exiled with it, we can play one of them without paying its mana cost. So we want to put spells under this, not just lands, so that we can get the most value out of it. We want to put some good things under this especially. Now, if we sneak this into play with our commander, it'll come in, we will Hideaway 3, and it's probably going to do damage right away since our commander is a 7/7, and this is a 6/5. Even if our opponent can block 5 of our damage and kill this, it's still got trample, so all it has to do is 1 damage for us to be able to cast one of those things that's underneath it. Now, if it dies and it still has cards exiled underneath it that we didn't get to cast or play, that's totally fine. They're gone. We wouldn't have seen them anyway if they were on the bottom of our library, but it's great if we're able to get this to hit and to survive that attack so that we can do it again and get the other card that we hit away as well. Pretty nice. Next up is O'Hare Coslam, Deepest Growth, from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. 3 and double green for a 6/5 legendary god with trample. 6/5 trample for 5 is already good. We already saw it from our bear. It says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we reveal that many cards from the top of our library. We can put a creature card and or a land card from among them onto the battlefield. So this is another sneak for us. We get to just grab something and put it directly into play, and it could be 2 cards if we find a creature and a land. Then we put the rest on the bottom in a random order, and when O'Hare Coslam dies, we return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. So it comes back as a tapped Temple of Cultivation. This is a land that taps for green once it's untapped, of course, and if we want, we can pay 2 and a green and tap it to transform it back, but only if we control 10 or more permanents and only at sorcery speed. So it is a permanent itself. It doesn't say non-land permanents, so it still counts our lands. But we have to pay 3 and tap it, and it'll flip back into O'Hare Coslam, but it will be tapped because it doesn't exile itself as part of this transformation. It just transforms. So it's tapped, and then it transforms into a tapped god that we'll get to use the next turn. That's pretty good too. Next we have Xenagos, God of Revels. 3 a red and a green for a 6/5 legendary enchantment creature god with indestructible. And as long as our devotion to red and green is less than 7, Xenagos isn't a creature. Sounds familiar, right? This is the god that Elspeth defeated in the story, leaving Theros without a red and green god, which is how we got Clothis during the Theros Beyond Death story. Anyway, works the same way with the devotion mechanic, and like I mentioned before, I hope, it does count its own pips for devotion. Xenagos says, at the beginning of combat on our turn, another target creature we control gains haste and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is that creature's power. This triggers at the beginning of combat on our turn. So if we attack with Raph and Mikey and we spin into Xenagos, this will not trigger that turn because we've already passed the beginning of combat step during that turn. That's okay. We still have a 6/5 indestructible that's attacking. But what if we spin into this with Raph and Mikey and we don't have enough devotion? Well, this will enter, tapped and attacking, and immediately stop being a creature, so it will still be tapped, but it'll be out of combat because it's just a legendary enchantment at that point. So it is possible to attack with Raph and Mikey and hit this or Clothis and, not actually get another attacker if we don't have enough devotion, which is why we want to try and play out as many permanents as we can so we have enough devotion when that does happen, since they are sweet creatures. A 6/5 indestructible attacker, we have better creatures to hit than that, but not creatures that are going to give such a huge pump to our other creatures on every subsequent turn, in addition to being an incredible indestructible blocker. Next we have Combustible Gearhulk, a card that I really like. It's not really a pet card of mine, but it just fits in so many decks. I just love this card. This is 4 and double red for a 6/6 artifact creature construct. It has first strike, and when it enters, target opponent may have us draw 3 cards. We can just get a free Ancestral Recall. If that player doesn't, we mill 3 cards, and then this creature deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of those cards. We have so many expensive cards in this deck, expensive in terms of mana cost. So if our opponent knows what deck we're playing, them choosing to have us mill 3 cards might do 10, 15, 20 more damage to them because we milled 3 huge creatures or big spells otherwise. If they don't want to risk taking that damage, well, that's okay. They can just have us draw 3 cards. That is the option before them when this comes in. And after that, it's a 6/6 first strike. Blocks great, does very well on the attack, assuming we spin into this with our commander. No big deal. Next up, we have Ground Chuck and Dirtbag from the Ninja Turtles main set. This is 4 and double green for an 8/8 legendary Ox Mole mutant. Good grief. So it's an ox and a mole, and they're both mutants. I do not know these characters, but they seem like a pretty cool card because they are an 8/8 for 6 with trample that makes all of our lands tap to add an extra green on top of whatever they were tapped for. So all of our lands tap for double mana. That's amazing. This is incredible acceleration for us, and it's an 8/8 trample on top of that. It only costs 6, so we can even get this out the turn before our commander, helping us ramp into our commander. Very strong. Next up, we have Jubilation from the recent Lorwyn Eclipsed commander product. This is 5 and a green for a 5/5 elemental incarnation that says when it enters, creatures we control, doesn't say other creatures, so it includes itself, get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. So this comes in and is a 7/7 trample, but it does not have haste. So that's fine. No reason for it to have haste, really, if we're trying to spin into this with our commander. If we sneak this in with Raph and Mikey, it's going to come in, give itself and Raph and Mikey +2/+2 and trample. Raph and Mikey already has trample, but it'll take the +2/+2, and then this is now a 7/7 trample that's already attacking. Very nice. It also has Encore for 7 and double green, which is to say when it's in our graveyard, if this gets killed and goes to the graveyard, or if we mill it with Combustible Gearhulk, something like that, then we can pay 7 and double green and exile it from our graveyard, and we make a token copy of it for each opponent that we control, and each copy will attack a different opponent. Those token copies get haste, and we have to sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step, and we can activate Encore only as a sorcery. But for 9 mana, we get 3 5/5s that all have haste and come in and give each other trample and +2/+2. They also give it to themselves. So they come in, and it's 3 trampling, hasty 11/11s. Since there's 3 of them, assuming we have 3 opponents, each giving +2/+2 to all of our creatures. So that's +6/+6 to each jubilation, plus the trample and haste. So that's 33 extra damage we get to do, trampling damage, for 9 mana. We can hit 9 mana pretty easily in this deck. So yeah, even if Jubilation dies in combat, we want to swing with it. Even if it's after this first turn, and it's a 5/5, yeah, swing with it. It's fine. Let it die. We can bring it back with its Encore ability and probably just win the game. Next up is Kodama of the East Tree. 4 and double green for a 6/6 legendary spirit with reach. It has Partner, which is not relevant in this deck, so just to cover the idea of it. It says whenever another permanent we control enters, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, we can put a permanent with equal or lesser mana value from our hand onto the battlefield. So anytime another permanent we control enters, that means when we make a land drop, we can put a permanent with mana value 0 onto the battlefield. What has a mana value of 0? Other lands. So whenever we play a land, we can put a second land into play. We can't keep doing that because it only triggers if the permanent wasn't put into the battlefield with this ability. But if we play, a 6 mana creature, then we can put a 5 mana creature into play. We can put another 6 mana creature into play if we have that. Or we could play a land. Anything in our hand, this gets it out of our hand. Kodama of the East Tree really helps us out, and is still a 6/6 that's attacking when we attack with our commander. So it can ramp us, it can sneak things into play, very powerful for us. Next is Kogla and Yadaro. I'd like to point out, we have a deck that's built around Raph and Mikey, and we have Raph and we have Mikey. But we also have this team up of Kogla and Yadaro, where we also have Kogla and Yadaro. I just wanted to call that out because it ended up being kind of funny. So Kogla and Yadaro is a team up from March of the Machine. This is 2 double red and double green for a 7/7 legendary ape dinosaur turtle. Ape and dinosaur turtle. It says when it enters, we either choose to give it trample and haste until end of turn, or to have it fight a creature we don't control. Having a 6 mana 7/7 come in and fight something for free is pretty good. Giving itself trample and haste is also pretty good. If we sneak this in with our commander, it could fight something, and then it's still attacking. Or if we don't want it to fight something, we can just give it trample and haste. It doesn't need the haste, but it can use the trample. That's fine. However, Kogla and Yadaro is one of the couple of cards we have in this deck that we can use earlier than its casting cost implies, because it has kind of a cycling ability. Rather than spending 2 double red and double green, we can spend 2 a single red and a single green and discard it from our hand in order to destroy an artifact or enchantment. It does say up to 1, so we don't have to do this. We don't have to destroy anything to activate this ability if we don't want to, but we sure can. It's a good way to remove something that's problematic that an opponent has. Then, whether or not we've destroyed an artifact or an enchantment, when we activate this and discard Kogla and Yadaro, we shuffle it into our library from our graveyard and then draw a card. So we get to say, Kogla and Yadaro is not really doing it for me here in my hand. I don't want this in my hand, I want this in my library so that I can spin into it with my commander. So what I'm going to do is pay 4 mana and shuffle it into my library and draw a new card, just to replace it with something else. And in the process, I get to blow something up. Great. Tucks it back in our library, removes something that's problematic, replaces itself, gets itself ready for us to find it with our commander. Kogla and Yadaro, love these guys. But let's talk about Kogla himself for a moment. Kogla is 3 and triple green for a 7/6 legendary ape. When it enters, it fights up to 1 target creature we don't control. That's okay. We would like for it to do that. Just kill something. And when it attacks, we destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. It has to be controlled by the defending player. It can't be something on a different opponent's board, but we can still hit something. I do want to mention, though, that this is an attack trigger. Kogla and Yadaro has an enters trigger to give itself trample and haste or have it fight something. Kogla also has an enters trigger. It fights something. But this attack trigger will not trigger if it's put into play by our commander. Because attack, in this sentence, means whenever Kogla is declared as an attacker during the declare attacker step. Kogla is not being declared as an attacker, he's simply being put into play tapped and attacking thanks to our commander. Our commander is declared as an attacker, which is what causes our commander's ability to trigger that would put Kogla into play. So this ability won't trigger when Kogla is put in with our commander's ability. Just worth noting. It will trigger this though, because it is entering. Finally, if we have a human in play, we can pay a generic mana and a green to return a human we control to its owner's hand, and Kogla will gain indestructible until end of turn. Don't have a lot of humans in this deck, got a lot of mutants. Looks like we have 0 humans in this deck. That's okay. That means we're not going to be able to use this last ability unless we had something that was like a changeling, or if we had a different... If you're going to alter this deck and put some humans in it, totally fine to do. You can do cool tricks with Kogla in the process. But even without that, a 7/6 that fights something on enter, and then every time it attacks thereafter naturalizes something, seems pretty good to me. Next is Pyrewood Gearhulk. This is 2 double red and double green for a 7/7 artifact creature construct. It has Vigilance and Menace. So notably, it has Vigilance, but if it's put into play tapped and attacking with our commander's ability, Vigilance isn't helping it, it's still tapped and attacking, even though it wouldn't have to be tapped if we had declared it as an attacker. But it does have Menace, so hard to block when it's put into play or when it attacks on its own. And it says when it enters, other creatures we control get +2/+2 and gain Vigilance and Menace until end of turn, and damage can't be prevented this turn. This doesn't come up that often, but sometimes an opponent has an ability that prevents damage, like Protection. Protection prevents damage, attachment, blocking, and targeting. So if someone says, haha, I block with my Protection from red creature and something else for your Pyrewood Gearhulk, then we say, okay, we just kill the thing with pro red. And they'll say, well, you can't, it has Protection from red. And we'll say, yes, we can, because damage can't be prevented this turn. Protection prevents damage. So yeah, if you don't know in Magic, can't always wins over can. That's just a basic rule. In any case, this will come in, and it will give all of our other creatures, even if we sneak it in with Raph and Mikey, +2/+2, Vigilance, and Menace. The Vigilance, like I mentioned, won't help if our creatures are already tapped and attacking, but the +2/+2 will, and so will the Menace. So this ability, we get about half of the value out of it, or probably a little more than half out of it, when it's snuck in with our commander, but we get the whole thing every subsequent turn when we're attacking with our 7/7 Vigilance Menace creature. And then this, like I mentioned, can be really powerful. It doesn't come up that often, but when it does, it really makes someone sad because they thought they were safe with their pro-red or green creatures. Canopy Guardian is next. This is another one of our dragons. 5 and double green for a 7/7 dragon with flying and ward 2 that says at the beginning of our upkeep, we put a number of +1/+1 counters on each other creature we control equal to that creature's toughness. This is insane. If this survives and we untap with this, we'll get this trigger. Kogla will become a 13/12 because it'll get 6 counters because it has a toughness of 6. Our commander is a 7/7, so it will become a 14/14. All of our creatures, other than Canopy Guardian itself, because it's each other creature, get all these counters and just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The Canopy Guardian is a great example in this deck of why our opponents might want to not target our commander with removal and instead target one of the things that we brought in with our commander or that we cast otherwise. Because if they don't kill Raph and Mikey, we're going to attack with it next turn and put something else that's problematic into play. If they do kill Raph and Mikey, they're using the removal on that rather than the Canopy Guardian, which is going to make our board unbelievably huge. So it forces them to use more removal than they otherwise would. And if they try to remove the Canopy Guardian, well, remember it has ward 2. So that's something they may have forgotten by the time they get around to actually casting the removal spell. Yeah, pretty sweet. Giant Ataphage is next. I love this card. I rarely get to put it in decks, but it just seems so much fun. 5 and double green for a 7/7 insect with trample. Big bug. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, it says, we make a token that's a copy of this creature. So it's not exactly Scoot Swarm, but it is 7 times the size of Scoot Swarm with Trample. So when this does combat damage to a player, which it probably will, whether we attack with it or sneak it in with our commander, since it's a 7/7 with Trample, we make a second giant Adaphage. The reason that's good is because we're not just making a 7/7 with Trample, we're making a 7/7 with Trample that makes copies of itself when it does combat damage to a player. So we attack with this, or we get to sneak it in with our commander, we do some damage, we make a second Adaphage. Let's say they both survive. We attack with them both next turn, they both do combat damage, we make a copy for each of the ones that did combat damage. So now we've got 4 of them, which is 28 trampling power on the battlefield. Just keeps getting bigger and bigger. One more way that, again, our opponents might use their removal on things that aren't our commander, which just opens us up for more powerful things. And again, if they do remove our commander, we've got so much ramp in this deck, you'll see it. The ability to replay our 7/7 trampling haste commander and just attack right away and get our trigger again, yeah, lots of fun. Titan of Industry is next, from Streets of New Capenna. I played this in Standard, it was a lot of fun. This is a 7/7 elemental for 4 and triple green. It has reach and trample, so good on attacks and good on defense. It says when it enters, we choose 2. We either destroy target artifact or enchantment, target player gains 5 life, we make a 4/4 green Rhino Warrior creature token, or we put a shield counter on a creature we control. A shield counter does have an inherent mechanical meaning. It means that a creature with a shield counter, if it would be assigned damage or destroyed, we replace that event with removing the shield counter. Sort of like when you try to untap a creature that has a stun counter on it, instead of untapping it, you just remove the stun counter. If you were to lightning bolt something with a shield counter on it, the lightning bolt would resolve, but the damage wouldn't be dealt. Instead, the shield counter would come off of it. If you were going to try and Doomblade or murder something with a shield counter on it, that spell would resolve and it wouldn't destroy the creature, it would just remove the shield counter. It's sort of like a bubble that pops. Even if the amount of damage dealt to the creature would not kill it, it still pops the bubble. But it doesn't protect it from things like Path to Exile, or being bounced, or being enchanted, things like that. Only damage and destroy effects. So Titan of Industry coming in and getting us 2 things. We blow something up and we protect one of our things. Or we make an extra creature that is not tapped and attacking, so it might be a good blocker. It's also 4 power, which is relevant for some of our other cards. Maybe we just need to gain a little life. Usually that's the worst option, but who knows what situation we're in. And it's a 7/7 trampler that our commander can flip into, and so we're doing a bunch of extra damage on top of our 7/7 trampling commander. Next up, we have Yidaro, Wandering Monster. This is the other half of Kogla and Yidaro. 5 and double black. I'm sorry, good grief. It's double red. There are 5 colors in Magic. This is the red one. This is an 8/8 legendary dinosaur turtle with trample and haste. Pretty good on its own. 8/8 trample with haste. Sure. We can also cycle it for 1 and a red. This is why this is another card that's good early in the game and good late in the game. Cycling just means we can discard this from our hand by paying 1 and a red, and we get to draw a card in the process. However, Yidaro has a special trigger when we cycle it, which will happen prior to drawing that card. It says when we cycle this card, we shuffle it into our library from our graveyard. So instead of, it does go to the graveyard, but technically we just take it and say, I'm cycling this, and we shuffle it right into our library. So we get to shuffle it in, and then we draw a new card, which might be Yidaro again. You never know. Because if we've cycled a card named Yidaro Wandering Monster, so only this card, 4 or more times during this game, put it onto the battlefield from our graveyard instead. So what this means is every time we cycle this, we shuffle it into our library, unless it's the 4th time we've cycled it. If it's the 4th time, we cycle it onto the battlefield. So we end up paying a total of 4 and quadruple red over the course of multiple times cycling this, if we draw it that many times, which is 1 more mana than it costs normally. But we did draw 4 other cards in the process, because we do get to draw even that 4th time. So yeah, Yidaro is a lot of fun, helps us early in the game, draws us a new card, and puts itself back into our library so that we can spin into it with our commander. Next we have Apex Altasaur, just the epitome of a fun dinosaur. 7 and double green for a 10/10 dinosaur that when it enters, it fights up to one target creature we don't control rather. And whenever it's dealt damage, it fights one target creature we don't control. So this thing fights, it says up to 1 both times. So we do not have to have it fight. But the idea is it comes in, it fights something. If it doesn't die, it can fight something else. And if it doesn't die, it can keep doing that until it either dies or we decide to stop having it fight things. So we are a little careful about this, and we have it come in and we have it kill 2 things, 3 things, 5 things if they're small enough. Just get rid of the most, small value creatures that our opponents have. Just keep killing them. And that's what it does when it enters. We then, on our next turn, attack with it and let it be blocked. So once it's blocked, it'll be dealt damage. It probably won't be killed unless an opponent has something that's 10 power or they block it with a bunch of things, which means we're killing a bunch of things anyway. And if it's not dead, we have the option to start the chain all over again. So if we bring this in with our commander, it'll enter and fight something, and we don't have to have it keep fighting things, but we sure can. Because sometimes it's better to have our commander spin into this 10/10 that can probably eat 3 or 4 creatures, maybe even ones that would have blocked our commander, or maybe ones that are on a different opponent's board, so we're sort of using our 1 attack to deal with 2 different things, 2 different players. And then the Altosaur, if it doesn't die, is still 10 power, even if it has a bunch of damage marked on it. It may die in the process of this fight, or this combat, but that's totally okay with us. And if we are able to make it so, let's say our opponent has 4 2-power creatures, or like 4 2/2s in play, the Altosaur can come in, fight one of them, then the next, then the next, then the last one. The Altosaur now has 8 damage marked on it, but that was all this opponent has. So it's able to get in and do its 10 damage to that opponent, as is our commander and anything else we were attacking with. We just play this in a smart way, even when it comes in with Mikey and Raph and Mikey rather, and we get a lot of removal and just a lot of fun. And again, it's a little bit of a removal magnet. Our opponents are likely to want to get rid of this in a way that doesn't trigger its enrage ability. And that's fine, because it means they're using that removal spell on something other than our commander. Next is World Spine Worm. 8 and triple green, an 11 mana card. What does it give us? Well, it gives us a 15/15 trampling worm. Huge worm, biggest worm you've ever seen. And when it dies, it leaves behind 3 5/5 worms with trample. It splits into 3. Isn't that crazy? At least it'll never come back. Oh wait, when it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, we shuffle it into our library. That means not only do we get 3 5/5s left behind, so it's sort of taken one thing and turned it into 3 parts of itself, which is easier for us to block with and maybe harder for our opponents to block against since it's more creatures. But also, this is back in our library for us to spin into with our commander, so we can get it back again. We never really lose the World Spine Worm. Great. Finally, in this section, I mentioned Apex Altosaur is the most fun you can have with a dinosaur. No, it's Galta. Galta is 10 and double green for a 12/12 legendary elder dinosaur with trample. Just a 12/12 trample. For 12, that would be okay, but it costs an amount of generic mana less to cast equal to the total power of creatures we control. In this deck, oftentimes Galta costs 2 green for a 12/12 trample. And that's just fun. This is a less than $1 card, reprinted in Foundations, and I'm glad to see her every time we get to see her. Love Galta. So that is our big hits. I want to go into our next section, which happens to fill out our 30 cards for our game plan. This is our burn section. Now, some of these are repeats, as you can see. There's 2 we haven't seen, but Clothis, of course, lets us do 2 damage to each opponent and gain 2 life if we, at the start of our pre-combat main phase, exile a non-land card from a graveyard. Parapet Thrasher can do 4 damage to each opponent that it didn't do damage to, or that a dragon didn't do damage to. Dragonhawk lets us do something similar to Clothis and shock each opponent for each card we don't play of the ones it exiles during our turn. And Combustible Gearhulk can either have us draw 3 cards if an opponent chooses to, or they could choose for us to mill 3 cards, and then they will take a bunch of damage based on those 3 cards' total mana value. We also have Warstorm Surge. I'll talk about this first. This is the big brother of Impact Tremors. 5 and a red for an enchantment that says whenever a creature we control enters, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. We can hit creatures with this. We can hit planeswalkers, or we have battles we can hit with this, or we can go to our opponent's faces. Imagine Galta coming in off of our commander, and now they have to deal with a 12/12 Trampler, but Warstorm Surge triggers, and we throw 12 damage at that defending player's face right away. Or we throw it at a different player's face. Warstorm Surge rewards us for any time we get a creature in play, whether we've cast it or whether we've gotten it into play thanks to sneaking it in from our commander or one of our other sneak type cards. Either way, we're doing a lot of damage and we're throwing it all around. We want to be a little careful with this and make the right choices. Either take out one opponent or clear the way for our creatures that are attacking. But we sure can, and it's almost like it doubles the damage of the creatures that are coming in, since we're going to do their power and damage right away and then do it again during combat. Last, we have Invasion of Karsus. This is a battle. Battles are a little funny, especially if you haven't seen them before or if you're new to Magic. The way this works is you pay 2 and double red for this siege. It comes in, it's sideways, and when it comes in, you choose one of your opponents to become its protector. You can then attack this battle instead of that opponent. The same way you can attack a planeswalker rather than an opponent. Anyone at the table, in fact, can attack Invasion of Karsus other than the opponent that you've chosen to become its protector. They don't get to attack it. What they can do is block whenever anyone attacks the battle, as though it were, themselves or a planeswalker they control. They can block with their own creatures. And whenever it gets attacked, it loses defense counters for every point of damage dealt to it. When it has no more defense counters, it has been defeated, and then you take it, we take it. It doesn't matter who's actually done the final damage to it. We get to take it, and at that moment, exile it, and we can cast the other side of it transformed, which is transformed. We can cast the other side of it, which has no mana cost. It's still casting a spell, but it doesn't cost us any mana. So the idea is you play this, you put it on under the protection of someone else. We still control it, but we choose an opponent who can protect it, that is either not going to block us or probably not going to, or maybe we don't care. Maybe we don't mind just swinging in with our huge commander or one of our flyers and trying to kill the Invasion of Karsus so that we can get its benefit. But it has a benefit when it first comes in. When it enters, it deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. That will kill 1 or 2 of our creatures, but it sets up to kill most of our opponent's creatures, especially their small value creatures. And even if it doesn't kill them, it makes them less likely to block when we attack that turn. Because now they all have 3 damage marked on them, and they might trade with our creatures, but our creatures are huge. So it may not kill our creatures in the process, and even if it does, they're losing more than we are, since our deck is all about sneaking creatures into play, and our commander has haste, and we've got so much ramp. So this is a little bit of pseudo-evasion, but also it just kills an awful lot of the board, and so it's one of our wraths. But what happens if we're able, or when we're able, to flip Invasion of Karsus? Well, we get Refraction Elemental, which is a 4/4 elemental that has ward, pay 2 life. So in order to target this, or rather when an opponent targets this with a spell or ability, the ward ability will trigger, and they have to pay 2 life or their spell or ability gets countered. For Refraction Elemental says, whenever we cast a spell, this creature deals 2 damage to each opponent. Whenever we cast a spell, doesn't matter what spell it is. This doesn't trigger, obviously, when we just put a creature into play with our commander or when we sneak it in another way, but if we're casting a spell, doesn't matter what it is, it comes with a free shock for each opponent from the Refraction Elemental. So totally worth it to be able to get more and more and more damage every time we cast more of our spells, and we get a 4-power creature, which could be relevant to some of our other cards. So we've got a little bit of burn in this deck just to supplement all of our big hits, but the big hits are the most fun part. And that is our game plan. Hey, did you just like this video? Nice, thanks a lot. You don't have to like it, it's fine if you don't want to, but I appreciate it if you do. Anyway, there's more where that came from. So let's talk, I want to go into the supplemental category and talk about all the ways that our game plan is supplemented by different things, but first we need to talk about this support category. We need to eat our vegetables. So we're going to begin with our card advantage section, which as usual, I have tagged as draw. It doesn't mean that all these cards actually draw us a card, they just give us access to more cards that we're able to play. It's just an easy shorthand. Bushwhack is a good example. This is a 1 green sorcery that lets us either search our library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. So lay of the land. We get to find a basic and put it in our hand. Or a creature we control fights a creature we don't control. This is usually going to be good for us because our creatures are so big. We just choose a creature of theirs or of our opponents that is going to die to this. Even if we're willing to trade, it's still a worthy trade. But Bushwhack can find us a land, and even though it costs us this card to do that, if we're doing that, we need that land more than we need this card. So it's a little bit of, it's not really a draw spell, but it's quote-unquote drawing us a card. We find a bush, or we whack something. Explore is next. For 1 and a green, we have a sorcery that lets us play an additional land this turn, and it draws us a card. Just straight up card draw at sorcery speed, and then an extra land drop that can really accelerate us. Very nice. Fire Prophecy is next. Fire Prophecy is great. 1 and a red for an instant that deals 3 damage to a creature. Only a creature, but at instant speed. It then says we may put a card from our hand on the bottom of our library, and if we do, we draw a card. Why would we care about this? Well, because sometimes we end up drawing the big creatures that we either don't have the mana to cast, or we just don't want to spend it to cast because it takes up our whole turn. We would rather spin into those creatures from our commander's ability. So this is sort of doing what Yadaro and Kogla and Yadaro do for us by taking that creature and putting it back in our library, albeit at the bottom, and replacing itself with a different card. And since that's happening in a way that doesn't, it's on top of Fire Prophecy's damage, this is sort of like us taking a card in our hand that we couldn't use at that time and getting one we could use. So it's like card advantage for us. So there you go. Herd Heirloom is next. 1 and a green for an artifact that if we tap it, we can add 1 mana of any color, but only to cast creature spells. A little restrictive as a 2 mana rock for us, but it does make red or green for us. That's pretty good. It also has another ability though, which is we tap it and we choose a target creature we control, and until end of turn, if that creature, of course we can only choose a creature that has power 4 or greater, so that's, I've been mentioning that might be relevant, like with our Rhino Warrior token that our big elemental makes, our big Nuka Penna elemental, or any number of other things that we've seen. The Refraction elemental on the backside of Invasion of Karsus. 4 power is important for us, and most of our creatures have it. So Herd Heirloom lets us say tap, and until end of turn, a creature with power 4 or greater that we control gains trample and becomes curious. It has this ability. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. So we can end up drawing a lot of cards off of this, even if all we really care about is this trample effect on it. Just keep using this over and over. And every turn we don't want to use this, we can use it for mana to cast our creature spells. It's also important to note that since this does not activate only at sorcery speed, we can have our commander attack, spin into whatever card is the first card we find in our deck, and put it into play tapped and attacking, and then at that point activate Herd Heirloom and give that creature trample if it didn't have it already. Or maybe it does have it already, and we want to just draw a card off of it because we know it's going to be able to do that combat damage to a player. We can also wait to activate Herd Heirloom until after blocks are declared. So like I mentioned before with some of the other cards that can give trample to our creatures, if an opponent thinks they're making a pretty good block by saying like, haha, you've got a 7/7 but it doesn't have trample, I'm going to block with this 1/1, we then activate Herd Heirloom, and now that 7/7 does have trample, and when it does combat damage to a player, when it tramples over, we'll draw a card off of it too. Pretty great. Next we have Hunter's Talent, which is this card. I'm kind of surprised this is played as little as it is because it does so much for us, and it gives us a great mana sink for all the mana we're going to have that we may not be using every turn. So this is a class enchantment that we can level up. What that means is it costs 1 and a green, and when it comes in, we get this first ability. At sorcery speed, we can pay 1 and a green and give it level 2, and it will gain this other ability as well. Once it's level 2 at sorcery speed, we can pay 3 and a green and get it up to level 3, and now it has all the text unlocked on it. Make sense? We're just unlocking new levels of it. So when it first comes in, target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to target creature we don't control. This is a bite effect. It's great. We've got a lot of big creatures. They're going to be able to kill off an awful lot of the creatures on our opponent's playmats, so we might as well use it for that. Even though it's sorcery speed to cast this enchantment, it's a sorcery speed just bite for 1 and a green, and that's pretty great. We can level it up for another 1 and a green, and at level 2, we get an attack trigger. Whenever we attack, that's with any number of creatures, any creatures we have, we choose one of our creatures, and target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. A little bit of a pump and a little bit of evasion, pretty nice. But even better than that, at level 3 for 3 and a green, we have an end step trigger. At the beginning of our end step, if we control the creature with power 4 or greater, we draw a card. We just get a free card if we have any of our big creatures in play, which is to say any of our creatures other than that Raphael that gives double strike. So yeah, Hunter's Talent can give us a new card every turn, albeit at our end step, after it's already had us remove a different creature and it's already giving us the ability to attack with a creature that's a little bigger and now tramples. It's also worth noting, this is not relevant in this deck, but if we had a creature that only had 3 power, we just attack with it, it now has 4 power and trample. And it keeps that 4 power, that power bonus, until end of turn, and would thereby trigger this last ability. Just to know. Kenrith's Transformation is next. This is another spell that's really more of a removal spell, but it does draw us a card when it enters. For 1 and a green, it's an aura that enchants a creature, draws us a card when it enters, and it makes the enchanted creature lose all abilities and become a 3/3 green elk. And that's it. So this is a removal spell. We put this on an opponent's creature, especially their commander, to shut them down for the duration of the game, or as long as it takes for them to sacrifice their commander, for them to attack with it and have it be blocked and thereby die. We don't have to put it on our commander. We can put it on whatever's most dangerous on the board, whatever's giving our opponents the most value. We care about whatever that is losing its abilities. And becoming a 3/3 elk is not super relevant, but it sure is funny. If you know anything about the provenance of this card and Oko in Throne of Eldraine. So being able to lock someone down with this is totally fine, and especially if it's something like, oh, your big commander with all those abilities is now a 3/3 vanilla elk. Oh, you're going to keep attacking me with it? Yeah, I'll pay 3 life every one of your turns to keep your commander locked down. Totally fine with me. And like I say, in the process, it replaces itself. Volcanic Spite is next. Volcanic Spite is Fire Prophecy with 1 change. It's the same, 1 and a red, instant speed, do 3 damage, but it can hit creatures, planeswalkers, or battles, and we have a battle or 2 in this deck, so Volcanic Spite might help us to defeat that battle. Then we get to put a card from our hand on the bottom of our library, and if we do, we draw a card. Same thing and play pattern as before, but a little more flexible than Fire Prophecy, so we run both. Elemental Bond is next. This is 2 and a green for an enchantment that says whenever a creature we control with power 3 or greater enters, we draw a card. In our deck, this essentially means whenever a creature enters, draw a card. There's only one of our creatures that won't trigger this, so having our commander attack, letting us put a creature into play, assuming we have any creatures left in our library, and it coming with a card draw, this is so strong. Of course we're going to run Elemental Bond. Next is Garruk's Uprising, also extremely strong for this deck. 2 and a green for an enchantment with 3 abilities. One of them is, all of our creatures have trample. They just do all the time. Solves all of our problems when it comes to evasion. It also says, when this enters, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. That's great. Free card that Garruk's Uprising replaces itself once it comes in, gives our stuff trample, assuming we have a big creature. Oh, but what if we play the creature after Garruk's Uprising? Well, whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters under our control, we draw a card. So if we've got one in play, or any number in play already, when this comes in, we draw. Everyone that comes in after this, whether we cast it or put it into play through a sneak effect like our commander, we draw as well. So this is kind of better than Elemental Bond in our deck. So we might as well run both, get double card draw. We've already got some card draw from Hunter's Talent's last ability. We might as well get it from Elemental Bond and from Garruk's Uprising, and from Master's Guidance, even more repeatable card draw. This is from the Avatar: The Last Airbender Eternal set. This is 2 and a green for an enchantment that says whenever we attack with 2 or more legendary creatures, we put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target attacking creatures. So a lot going on here. The first thing I want to mention is whenever we attack means when we declare attacks. This is happening at the same time as our commander commander's attack trigger. So if our commander is the only one we're attacking with, then we are not attacking with 2 or more creatures, legendary or otherwise. Even if our commander puts a legendary creature into play after that, this would not trigger unless we have 2 creatures attacking when we declare that attack, and they're both legendary. But if that's the case, and we have plenty of legendary creatures in this deck to do so with, then we get to put a +1 counter on each of up to 2 target attacking creatures. That means we can't put both counters on the same creature, but we can put one +1/+1 counter on one creature and one on a different one, as long as those creatures are attacking. They don't have to be the legendary creatures we attacked with. So what's nice about this is, if we have our commander, and then let's say we have Kogla in play, and we attack with both of them, Kogla will trigger and blow up a defending player's artifact or enchantment. Our commander will trigger, and this will trigger. If we stack the triggers in a certain way, if we stack it so that our commander's trigger resolves before Master's Guidance. Actually, no, I'm lying to you. This is what I should be saying. This will trigger at the same time as our commander, but we will never be able to put counters on the creature that comes in, that our commander puts into play, because when this ability triggers, we have to choose the targets then. And at that point, our commander's ability has not resolved, so it does not have, so the creature that our commander brings in is not going to be in play at the time we have to choose targets. However, if we're attacking with 2 or more legendary creatures, then there's those 2 creatures at least that we can put counters on. If we're attacking with 2 or more legendary creatures, and there are other creatures as well, maybe it's or more legendary creatures, or it's 2 legends and 3 other things. The point is that we can put these 2 counters on any of our attacking creatures, as long as those creatures are attacking when Master's Guidance triggers. Pretty good. We get to pump some things up. And at the beginning of our end step, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, we draw a card. That is exactly the text of the last level of Hunter's Talent. So yeah, extra ways for us to get even more cards every turn with these 4 cards. Next we have Migration Path, one of my very favorite versions of Explosive Vegetation. This is 3 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search our library for up to 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. That is Explosive Vegetation. What makes Migration Path better is that it has cycling for 2 generic, meaning while it's in our hand, we can pay 2 generic and discard it to draw a card. If we don't need the ramp in this deck, we can draw a different card. A lot of times, we're just going to want the ramp. Just get more basics into play so we can keep playing our commander over and over if it keeps being removed, or we can play our other big spells. I always want to play Migration Path as Explosive Vegetation, but it's nice to have the flexibility to cycle it if we need to. We've seen the Parapet Thrasher. It can give us card advantage because when one or more dragons we control deal combat damage to an opponent, if we haven't chosen it already this turn, we can exile the top card of our library and we can play it this turn. We can only have access to that card this turn, but we do have access to it this turn, so pretty good. The same is true of Dragonhawk. Enters or attacks, we exile a bunch of cards and we can play them this turn. Pretty good. And if we don't, we're going to be able to turn them into damage later on. Escape to the Wilds is next. Originally from Throne of Eldraine, this is 3, a red, and a green for a sorcery that has us exile the top 5 cards of our library, and we can play those cards until the end of our next turn. So this turn and our next turn. And at the end of that turn, those cards will just stay in exile forever if we didn't play them. It also lets us play an additional land this turn. Not next turn, but this turn right now. So if we get 2 lands out of the top 5 that we exile, we can play one of them right away, even if we haven't made our land drop. Even if we have made our land drop, rather, and play the other one on our next turn. If we haven't made our land drop yet, we can play both of those right now. So this gives us a little bit of acceleration and access to 5 more cards. That's great, in these colors especially. We've seen the Evercoat Ursine gives us that double hideaway, so we're at least going to be able to get one of these out, assuming this does combat damage to a player when it comes in from our commander's ability. Oher Kozlam, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we look at the top that many cards, the amount of damage we dealt, and we can put either a land into play or a creature into play, or both from those cards. Amazing. Combustible Gear Hulk, our opponent might have us draw 3 cards, and they probably will if they know what's good for them. Kogla and Yadaro Yadaro itself both have a cycling style ability. Yudaro's is actual cycling. Kogla and Yudaro is not called cycling, but it's us discarding it, shuffling it into our library, and drawing a card in addition to destroying an artifact or enchantment. Pretty sweet. Lots of different good ways for us to get more things into our hand. That's our card advantage section. Let's talk now about acceleration, which, we've just shorthanded as ramp. We've got a lot of this. 23 cards somehow give us acceleration. That's great. We're starting with Soul Ring. We don't have that many artifacts in this that do this for us, and there's a reason for that we'll see later in our Wrath section. But we have a few, and they're just good staples. Soul Ring is the best of them. 1 generic mana for an artifact that comes in untapped and taps for 2 colorless mana. Symbol of the format. Very powerful. $1.50. Put it in your deck. Utopia Sprawl is next. This is a single green for an aura that enchants a forest. We cannot enchant a land that doesn't have the forest type. And as it enters, we choose a color. Whenever the enchanted forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of the chosen color. So if this is a basic forest that we've put it on, we might want to choose red. And so now, whenever we tap that forest, it won't just make a green, it'll make a green and a red. But if it looks like we have enough red in our mana production, we might choose green, which means that this forest is going to tap for a green and a red. Or we might have a non-basic forest that we want to just supplement its ability to tap for mana since it's already flexible. So Utopia Sprawl, very strong card for us. Wild Growth, an even older one that is more simple. A single green for an aura that enchants a land. Doesn't have to be a forest. And whenever that land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional green. So the difference between these two are Utopia Sprawl has to enchant a forest, Wild Growth can enchant any land. But Wild Growth always makes green, and Utopia Sprawl, we get to choose what it's going to make every time. Once it comes in, we choose that every time. After that, it will make the additional mana of whatever color we've chosen. So a little more flexible for Utopia Sprawl in terms of mana, less flexible in terms of what it goes on. But we've got a lot of forests in this deck, so both of these are great for us as very inexpensive ramp. So too is Arcane Signet, a 2-mana rock that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, which is to say in this deck it taps for red or green. A 2-mana untapped artifact that taps for mana, a mana rock, we're going to take that every day. It's exactly where we want to be. We've already seen Explore. It gives us the ability to make an additional land drop. Very good. Now here's Farseek. Farseek is a rampant growth variant, which is to say it's 1 and a green for a sorcery that searches our library for a land and puts it on the battlefield for us. This one finds a plains, island, swamp, or mountain, puts it on the battlefield tapped, and then we shuffle. So we don't have any plains, islands, or swamps in our deck, but we do have plenty of mountains, and we do have some lands that are dual typed. It doesn't matter if a land is a forest, if it's also a mountain. As far as Farseek is concerned, all we have to do is find a mountain. We don't care about its other types. So what we do is we find one of our dual tap lands usually. Since this is going to come in tapped anyway, we might as well get something that can tap for both of our colors. So we find a forest mountain with Farseek, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. The only reason we wouldn't do that is if we don't have any left in our deck. And then at that point, we just find one of our basic mountains. Totally okay. Gruul Signet is another 2-mana rock. 2 mana for an artifact that if we pay a generic into it and tap it, it makes a red and a green. So we do have to tap 2 mana sources for this, whatever we're using to pay this generic mana cost, and the Signet itself. But when we do, we're making 2 mana. So it's not like we're, having to filter in a way that puts us down on mana. This does accelerate us, and it fixes our colors. So pretty nice. Herd Heirloom, we've already seen. It taps for a mana that we can use for creature spells only. We talked about Farseek being a rampant growth because here's rampant growth. 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. We want to run this. It's the right rate for getting a land into play tapped that we can use whenever we need to. We've only got 2 colors. It's great for us. This is an effect that we've seen on other things, so we might as well have it. Talisman of Impulse is our last mana rock, I believe. It's another 2-mana rock, comes in untapped, and taps for colorless on its own. We can also have it tap for red or green if we're willing to have it do 1 damage to us. This is a great deal. If we don't need the colored mana, we just tap it for colorless. If we do need the colored mana, what that means is tapping this for colored mana is the difference between us casting a spell or not being able to cast it, which is sort of like not having enough mana for it anyway. Would you pay a point of life to make a mana so that you can cast a spell? Because that's what's happening here. And you would do that all day. Because otherwise you have to have that card, that spell, sit in your hand, not doing anything for you, when you could be doing something for you right now. Talisman of Impulse almost always taps for colorless, but if you need it for colored mana, it's fine to let it do 4, 5, 6 damage to you over the course of a game. But that's not usually going to happen in this deck, because this deck has a properly built mana base. Even if you need it though, sometimes you will early. Totally worth doing. The amount of damage you'll get out of this in the form of the spells you're casting is much greater than the amount of damage it's going to do to you. Alright, next is Domri, Anarchobolus. This is our Planeswalker for the deck. 1 a red and a green for a 3 loyalty Domri Planeswalker. This guy is dead as of War of the Spark. He has an ability that gives all of our creatures +1/+0. We don't even have to activate it. It's just a static ability, pumps up our whole team. That includes creatures that just came in this turn or were put into play thanks to our commander's sneaking ability. We can +1 Domri to add a red or a green, and also, irrespective of whether or not we use that red or a green for a creature spell, our creature spells this turn can't be countered. Very nice. Protects us in a great way from one of the things that can most easily disrupt our plan. And -2 Domri, and target creature we control fights target creature we don't control. This is everything we want. It accelerates us, it protects us, it pumps our team, and it makes it so we can remove things that are in our way, and our stuff is probably not going to die because our stuff is huge. Great. Thanks, Domri. You jerk. He sided with Nicol Bolas during the War of the Spark. Yeah. Don't like this guy. Anyway, Klothys lets us exile a card from a graveyard at the beginning of our first main phase, and if it was a land, we add a red or a green to our mana pool. Great. A little bit of inconsistent acceleration, but it sure is there for us on a pretty good card otherwise. Goreclaw, as we've seen, discounts our creature spells that have power 4 or greater. Hulking Raptor adds 2 green mana to our mana pool at the start of our pre-combat main phase. And now we have the second battle in our deck. It's Invasion of Zendikar. It's another explosive vegetation. 3 and a green for a 3 defense battle that when it enters, we search our library for up to 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So similar to what Migration Path does without us being able to cycle it. We do have to... We get this into play, and we get that explosive vegetation effect right away, and then when we defeat this, we can cast it as Awakened Skyclave. This is a 4/4 elemental with vigilance and haste, and as long as it's on the battlefield, it's a land in addition to its other types, and it taps for 1 mana of any color. Since it has haste, it can make that mana right away. It's also nice that we're able to do this as if we have a way to do direct damage to a battle, which, as you've already seen one way, in the form of it's not Fire Prophecy, the other one that's like Fire Prophecy, but can hit battles. If we've already put some damage on our Invasion of Zendikar, or even if we haven't, I guess, that card, which is going to drive me crazy, we're going to go find it right now. It is Volcanic Spite. There you go. If Volcanic Spite is in our hand, it can just do 3 damage to Invasion of Zendikar, flip Invasion of Zendikar right away, we cast it as the Awakened Skyclave, then we go to attacks, and this has haste. So it's a 4/4 Vigilance Haste creature that we get to attack with as well. Very nice. We've seen Michelangelo. Michelangelo ramps us in the way that when he does combat damage to a player, we can put a creature and or a land from our hand onto the battlefield. So we get a creature into play and a land maybe, and if all we have is land, we do get that land, so that's acceleration. Migration Path, we've already seen. It is Explosive Vegetation with Cycling 2. New Generation's technique is also Explosive Vegetation. 3 and a green, sorcery, search for 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. However, this has Sneak for 2 and a green. So if it is combat, and we're in the Declare Blocker step, and we have a creature that isn't blocked, we can return that creature to our hand and cast this card for 2 and a green. Instead of having that creature do damage, we get 2 basics onto the battlefield tapped. That's pretty good too. Even if we're hard casting this, that's still pretty great. All the explosive vegetations we can get, we want. Other than original explosive vegetation, because we've got some options that are better than it, including Sky Shroud Claim. This is 3 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search our library for up to 2 forest cards and put them on the battlefield and shuffle. You'll notice this does not say basic lands, and it also doesn't say put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. It's because this card is sort of in a way that Explosive Vegetations is a double Rampant Growth, this is a double Nature's Lore. We're not running Nature's Lore in this deck, as you've seen. We're running Farseek. Nature's Lore finds a forest and puts it into the play without being tapped. And it costs the same mana as Farseek, which finds a plains, island, mountain, or swamp and puts it in tapped. It coming in untapped is more powerful, but it's also more expensive monetarily. So instead of Farseek costing like 70 cents, oftentimes Nature's Lore costs $3.50, and it's just not doing more for us in this deck because we're trying to get to big things. It can do more, sure, but a lot of the times with our cards, since we're not running any premium dual lands, all it would be doing is finding a basic forest, which could be good, but it's a little boring for $3. I'd rather do more fun things with our budget. Skyshroud Claim, on the other hand, is pretty fun. If we find 2 basic forests with this, which would be a totally fine use of it, it's like we've spent 2 mana total because we've spent 4, but we get 2 back since they come in untapped. If we don't want to find 2 basic forests, we can find 1 or 2 non-basic forests, have them come in tapped, and now we've fixed our green and our red mana for next turn. Or maybe we get a forest, a basic forest, and a non-basic forest. We can use one right away, we use the other one another time, totally great. It's also good if you were to take this deck and put more premium lands in it, because then you can get those in more likely to be untapped. Skyshroud Claim is especially good for our Tango land that we'll see later on, which I believe is Cinderglade. But yes, we'll talk about it once we get to our land base. Very nice for us and inexpensive monetarily. We've seen Escape to the Wilds, lets us exile the top 5. We can make an extra land drop this turn, and that's our acceleration. O'Hare Kazlam, much like Michelangelo, when it does combat damage to a player, we get to reveal that many cards from the top of our library, and we can put a creature and or a land from among them onto the battlefield. We always want to put the land into play. Ground Chuck and Dirtbag makes our lands tap for an extra green mana. All of them. It's like all of our lands have wild growth at that point. Very good. And Kodama the East Tree, whenever any of our permanents enter, we can put a permanent with lesser mana value from our hand onto the battlefield, assuming those permanents didn't enter with this ability, which means we can always, if we have permanents coming in, get any lands that are in our hand out of our hand and into play. And they don't even come in tapped. So that is our acceleration section. Here's our interaction section right here. We have, which again I've just tagged as removal. Bushwhack can have one of our creatures fight another creature. Lightning Bolt, you gotta run it if you're running a red deck. It's a single red for an instant that does 3 damage to any target. Any target. This can kill a planeswalker. This can kill a creature. This can go to your opponent's face. This can flip Invasion of Zendikar on its own. Just 1 red mana at instant speed, incredibly high value for the mana. And you don't have to run the Strixhaven Mystical Archive printing of it. There are a lot of beautiful lightning bolts out there, including the original Christopher Rush one. But I love the Mystical Archive, so that's why I'm sitting on this. We've seen Fire Prophecy, 3 damage to a creature, and it lets us bottom one of our cards in hand to draw. Hunter's Talent enters, and we have one of our creatures bite an opponent's creature. Kenrith's Transformation makes another creature into a 3/3 elk with no abilities. Stump Stomp is 1 and a red or green for a sorcery that has one of our creatures deal damage equal to its power to a creature or planeswalker we don't control. This is again Rabid Bite at sorcery speed, but we can spend red mana on it, which is nice, or we can play this as a tap land, Burn Willow Clearing. It comes in tapped, taps for red or green, just as a way where if we have this early on in the game and we really need land more than we need the ability to remove opponent's creatures, we just play this as a tap land and move on with our life. Just totally be fine with it. We're running 40 lands in this deck, but we also have 2 of these modal double-faced cards that are lands on the back, so we have access to 42 lands. Now we can't find Burn Willow Clearing if we were to tutor for a land. It's not basic, it doesn't have the basic types, and it's not a land in any zone other than the battlefield when it's played that way. But it's nice to know that it's available to us, even if it doesn't. I don't count these toward our land base. That's why Moxfield is saying we have 42 lands. We actually only have 40 lands, and then 2 of these MDFCs. We'll see the other one soon. Next up is Super Combo. This is from the Turtles commander deck. For 1 and a green, we have a sorcery that has target creature we control deal damage equal to its power to target creature and opponent controls. Another sorcery speed rabid bite. But it has replicate for 2 generic mana, meaning when we cast it, we can pay its replicate cost any number of times, and we choose new targets for each copy. So we can have one of our creatures deal damage to 3 different things if we're willing to spend 4 more mana on it. We could have 3 of our creatures each deal damage to the same thing if we're willing to spend 4 more mana on it, because it's 2 for each time we replicate it. And because we have so much access to mana in this deck, this can turn into a real combo of us removing a lot of creatures or just reducing them or reducing their ability to survive combat right before we go to combat. Pretty good. Yeah, we've seen Volcanic Spite. It's Fire Prophecy, but better. We want that. Bridgeworks Battle is our other MDFC for the deck. It's 2 and a green for a sorcery that gives one of our creatures +2/+2 and has that fight a creature we don't control. So it's not a bite, our creature's still going to take damage from the other creature, but it does get pumped up in the process. And if our creature survives, which is not unusual in this deck, it keeps that +2/+2 the whole turn, and we get to attack with it, either with our commander or maybe we are talking about our commander, and it's going to be able to do, hopefully, even more damage to our opponents and the creatures they block with. We just have to remember that it's still got damage marked on it from the fight that it underwent as part of Bridgeworks Battle. Or we can play this as Tanglespan Bridgeworks, which is a land that taps for green mana, and it comes in tapped unless we pay 3 life as it comes in. So we can bolt this in and have an untapped green source as well. That's okay too. We talked about with our Talisman earlier, paying life in order to get more mana. Totally worth paying 3 life out of our 40 life to have this come in untapped if we need the green mana right then. And if we don't have to. Great options for us. And this is all set on Eldraine, my favorite plane. So yeah. Next up, we've seen Domri. Domri can -2 to have one of our creatures fight a creature we don't control. Parapet Thrasher can destroy an artifact an opponent controls whenever it or other dragons deal combat damage to a player. An opponent, that is. Kogla and Yadaro can enter and fight a creature we don't control, or we can cycle it and it will blow up an artifact or enchantment. Kogla, the Titan Ape, enters and fights something, and then when it attacks, it destroys an artifact or an enchantment. Warstorm Surge does damage to any target, which can be non-players. It can be battles or planeswalkers or creatures, based on the amount of power of whatever creatures we have entering when they enter. Titan of Industry, when it enters, can blow up an artifact or an enchantment, and Apex Allosaur fights everything we want it to, every time it enters or takes damage. That is our interaction section. We've got 2 Wraths in the deck. One we've already seen, Evasion of Karsus. It's going to do 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker when it enters. Brotherhood's End is a modal card. For 1 and double red, at sorcery speed, we can have it do 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, same as Evasion of Karsus. Or we can have it destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. This will blow up our own mana rocks, which would be unfortunate. But if we're doing this, we're doing it because either we don't have that many mana rocks out that right now, because we don't need them compared to all of our land ramp we have, or because, most of all, our opponent's artifacts of mana value 3 or less are more dangerous to us than the benefits we're getting from our own. If our opponent has a bunch of constructs, maybe they're playing a bunch of Thopters, or they have a bunch of Karnstructs in play, lots of different tokens, lots of different non-token artifacts can be dangerous for us. Maybe we want to just put someone off of their acceleration, and all of their acceleration is artifacts. Brotherhood's End can help us with that. And those are our 2 Wraths. Let's talk now about the categories that supplement our game plan. I've already mentioned this sneak category, but these are ways that we can get things into play without just having to cast them, or without casting them in the same way, essentially. So we've already seen Michelangelo and Raphael, how they actually have the sneak mechanic, which can be helpful to us, even though Michelangelo is not costing us less mana. It's even a more restrictive, same amount of mana. But Raph is costing less mana for us to sneak him in. Just like New Generation's technique is Explosive Vegetation that we can sneak in for less mana. O'Hare Kaslam can put a creature or land into play when we get it to sneak in, as can Michelangelo, of course, when we do combat damage with it. Kodama the East Tree, we've already talked about how it sneaks things in whenever we put any other permanent into play. And Doors of Durin from the Lord of the Rings set is 3, a red, and a green for a legendary artifact that says whenever we attack, we scry 2, and then we can reveal the top card of our library. We don't have to, we might just do the scry. If, when we reveal it, it's a creature card, we put it on the battlefield tapped and attacking. And until our next turn, it would gain Trample if it's a dwarf or Hexproof if it's an elf. I don't think we have either of those in our deck. We do not. So we don't care about that part. What we care about is the fact that when we attack, we get a free scry. We can look on top of our library and see what our and maybe see what our commander is about to put into play. If we see 2 creatures, we can just put one of those on top, and Doors of Durin will put it into play tapped and attacking. Then our commander's ability will resolve, assuming we had it resolve second, and we get another creature. Doors of Durin is just here as sort of a backup to what Raph and Mikey is doing anyway. It only looks too deep, but that's okay. We've got plenty of creatures in the deck. So yeah, seems like a fun supplement to what we're doing. And the Scry 2 isn't nothing. So that is our sneak section. We have a bunch of ways to pump up our team and make them bigger even than they already were. Hunter's Talent, second chapter, has one of our attacking creatures when we attack get +1/+0 and trample. Domri gives all of our creatures +1/+0. Master's Guidance can put counters on our creatures when we attack with 2 or more legendary creatures. Rhythm of the Wild is an enchantment for 1, a red, and a green that makes all of our creature spells uncounterable and gives all of our non-token creatures Riot. Riot means when they enter, they either have haste or they get a +1/+1 counter. That is not a huge bonus, but the idea of having all of our non-token creatures, including the ones that we sneak in with our commander or with one of our other sneaky abilities, that they all come in with a +1/+1 counter, that's pretty good. That's a solid effect on its own. That's Renata or Grumgully on top of our creature spells being unable to be countered. Or if we need them to have haste because we want to play something pre-combat, that's pretty good too. Goreclaw gives all of our power 4 or greater creatures +1/+1 and trample whenever she attacks. Unnatural Growth, this card wins games. It seems restrictive to cast, but we have so much green production in this deck and so much ramp, it's just very strong. From Midnight Hunt originally, 1 and quadruple green for an enchantment that says at the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. At the beginning of each combat, that means on our opponent's turns too. And it says until end of turn, which means our creatures are going to be twice the size they were until the end of every turn. The only time they're not twice the size is, the only time they are the size that they're printed, essentially, is at the start of every turn until combat. Because Unnatural Growth makes them huge for the rest of the turn, starting at the start of combat. Now, obviously, this will not impact creatures that are put into play with our commander's ability, because the beginning of combat trigger has already resolved at that point, and they will be coming in afterwards, but it does affect our commander. So attacking with a hasty 14/14 Trampler seems pretty good, especially when it gets you another creature in play that has its printed stats. Yeah, or maybe bigger than its printed stats if you have Rhythm of the Wild in play. Or Domri. Xenagos, at the beginning of combat on our turn, another creature we control gets haste and a bonus to its power and toughness equal to its power. Very big. Jubilation gives all of our creatures trample and +2/+2 when it enters, whether as itself or as an encore token of itself. Pyrewood Gearhulk does that, except it gives +2/+2 vigilance and menace to every other creature, so it's every creature other than itself when it enters. And it makes damage unpreventable. Pretty good. And Canopy Guardian, even better, at our upkeep, if it survived, all of our other creatures get a number of counters on them equal to their toughness. And again, those counters will just persist as long as we've got those creatures in play. That is our pump section. We have a section of evasion cards here. Things that we've seen all of, but worth noting, the way that we get evasion in this deck. Herd Heirloom can give one of our power 4 or greater creatures trample and curiosity when we tap it. Hunter's Talent can give, like I said, trample and +1/+0 to one of our attacking creatures when we attack with it. Garruk's Uprising gives all of our creatures trample. Goreclaw gives all of our power 4 or greater creatures trample and +1/+1 when she attacks. Jubilation gives all of our creatures trample and +2/+2 when it enters. And Pyrowood Gearhulk enters and gives all of our creatures +2/+2 vigilance and menace, which is evasion, and is very powerful evasion when it enters. And that's the evasion section for us. We have some protective cards. We've seen Rhythm of the Wild. It protects our spells by making them uncounterable. Titan of Industry protects one of our creatures by putting a shield counter on it if we want. And we have the Swifties. Swiftfoot Boots are 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature hexproof and haste. This is in here so that we can cast our commander. Oftentimes we're able to ramp hard enough that we can play our commander and still have extra mana left over. So hopefully we've played the Swiftfoot Boots by that point. We spend 1 extra mana to make our commander. It already has haste, but giving it hexproof makes it so we don't have to spend any later turns replaying it without our opponents finding some way to board wipe or force us to sacrifice it. So a little bit of protection in the form of hexproof, but an inexpensive card and a very powerful one at that. That's our protection section. We do have a little bit of token generation in this deck, not very much. Giant Adaphage can make copies of itself when it does combat damage. Worldspine Worm leaves behind 3 5/5 trampling worm creature tokens. And Titan of Industry can make some of these 4/4 green Rhino Warrior creature tokens. All of these tokens are big enough to trigger our things that care about power 4 or greater, so that's nice. It's just nice to see that we don't need to make too many tokens, even though we do need to make a few in this deck. And finally, we have one more section in the deck, which I've called Double Double. So Raphael is in this section because he gives all of our creatures double strike, when all of our attackers double strike, that is. I mentioned at the start of the video that the start of going through all these cards, that there's a considering section at the bottom of this Moxfield page. Lots of other cards that I ended up not putting in, but I could have. That section has more cards in all the sections that we've been looking at today, but including the Double Double section. This section isn't just about giving double strike. Sometimes it's about doubling powers. I guess I could put Unnatural Growth in this, actually. Let's do that right now. We're here. We're getting to see this live. You're welcome, Internet. So now this is another way to do it. We have lots of different things that double up our stats or our counters or things on our creatures. So being able to make our things even bigger and double them, or like we have damage doublers in this section as well. Like when they do damage, they do twice as much. That's pretty great. So other things in that category help it out. So yeah, notably, you haven't seen me talk about an extra combats section, because even though there were a bunch of cards that I considered for putting in for that reason, because we can get a lot of value out of it, it felt like it was sort of gilding the lily. It was more than was necessary for this deck to be fun and good, and it could make playing the deck at a table with your friends a little more oppressive feeling, even if it isn't actually mechanically oppressive, than you really want with the impression of this deck. This deck already feels like it goes faster than it ought to, because we're spending a lot more of our card slots on acceleration than we are on threats, because we're not playing so much synergy other than the things that care about power 4 or greater. Our opponent's decks are probably going to be working a little bit differently from our deck, and because of our more straightforward game plan, there's not really a need for us to double up on our combats. We don't have to have a second combat and therefore get a second attack trigger from our commander just to be able to compete. But if you wanted to go that way, like I mentioned at the start, the considering section has a bunch of good options for that, and I encourage you to check it out. That covers all of the spells in our deck. We're going to talk now, as we always do, about our lands. We're running 19 basics in this deck. Almost twice as many forests as we have mountains, or almost half as many mountains as we have forests, I guess. A little more. Just because most of our deck is green. But I want to make sure we always have access to red, so I Could have skewed this a little bit more toward forests, but I tend to push things a little bit closer to the middle if I can, just to make sure we get our colors when we need them. Not going to be that big of a deal as we go through the game, but we're never going to be in a game where we absolutely need all 12 of our forests, since we have so many other good lands, many of which are basic typed, which we'll talk about in a moment. Sheltered Thicket is our bicycle land. This is a tap land that has the basic types. It is a mountain and a forest, so we can find this with Skyshroud Claim or with Farseek, since it's a mountain for Farseek and it's a forest for Skyshroud Claim. It's a good one for us to find as well because it's a tap land, so both of those spells put the land we find into play tapped anyway. But if we find this later on in the game, we can cycle it when we don't need more mana and we just want to draw another card. Paying 2 and discarding this to draw a card is totally worth doing. If you wanted to upgrade this, I think that cycling lands are good, but you sure could upgrade this to a Stomping Ground, which is a shock land and is also dual typed, just much more expensive. Rootbound Crag is a check land. It enters tapped unless we control a land of one of the 2 types that matches its colors, and this is red or green, so we need to control a mountain or a forest. We've got 19 basic mountains and forests, and we've got 4 lands that are dual typed. So we've got a total of 23 cards in the deck that Rootbound Crag will be able to see and come in untapped thanks to. But if you wanted to upgrade this, I consider at this point it's a side grade, and it's much more expensive. You could get yourself a Rockfall Vale, which is a slow land. I think slow lands are an okay upgrade to check lands. They're just more expensive. And also, Rockfall Vale has great art on it, but it does not have a dinosaur roaring in the distance. Let's take a closer look. Roar. All right. We're running Mossfire Valley. This is a filter land. It is just the same as our Gruul Signet we saw, but on a land. Pay 1, tap it, and it makes 1 of each of our colors of mana. Everything I said about the Gruul Signet is still true here. Totally worth running this. It gives us our colors. It can't tap for mana on its own unless we have another mana source, but we can just make a plan around that, and it's good for us. It gives us our colors. We're running 5 fixing lands, starting with Castle Garenbrig. This is one of our more expensive cards in the deck. This is from Throne of Eldraine. It's a land that comes in tapped unless we control a forest, and it taps for green. We can also pay 2 and double green and tap it to make 6 green that we can only use on creature spells and abilities of creatures. So we're tapping 4 mana and this land, so that's sort of like spending 5 mana, to make 6. That accelerates us by just 1, but 1 can be enough, especially when we're casting these huge creatures, and they can sometimes give us that value right back right away. Castle Garenbrig is easy to replace in this deck if you don't own one and you don't want to spend $6 on it. And I have found that unless you're playing big green decks, Castle Garenbrig doesn't usually make the cut, at least for my decks. But it is very strong, and it's worth at least $6. So yeah, if you're willing to spend it, or if you already have it, put it in this deck, it'll fit great. Obviously, we're going to run Command Tower. This is an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, just the same way that Arcane Signet does. So this is a dual land that comes in untapped, perfect for our deck. We would play this if it was a tapped dual, like Path of Ancestry. It's a tap land with exactly the same text as Command Tower. It makes us a red or it makes us a green. However, when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. So obviously, this shares our commander shares creature types with itself. When we cast our commander with Path of Ancestry's mana, we get that scry. Very nice. We also have 4 other creatures in the deck that are either mutants, ninjas, or turtles. I believe we have we have at least 4 of them, actually. Because we have Raphael, we have Michelangelo, we have Dirthog, whatever that is. I think that one's a mutant. And then we have Kogla and Yadaro itself. Yadaro is a turtle. So yeah, we have at least 4 more beyond our commander. And even if all we had was our commander, a tapped dual land is totally fine for us. Especially since it gives us a scry on our commander. We're running Myriad Landscape. This is a tap land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type, meaning 2 basic mountains or 2 basic forests. and then we put those on the battlefield tapped and we shuffle. Sort of like a double Rampant Growth. But it's slow. This land comes in tapped, it requires us to pay mana into it and tap and sack it, and when we get those lands, they come in tapped themselves. However, this is one land drop that's turning into 2 lands in play that tap for colored mana, so it is acceleration in our mana base, albeit slow acceleration. I think this card is great in this deck. If you wanted to replace it with Blighted Woodland, you could do that instead. Blighted Woodland enters untapped, and it can find 2 basic lands that don't have to share a land type, which I don't think is a big advantage or disadvantage. But it costs 3 and a green tap and sack. So it's slower to accelerate you, but it doesn't come in tapped and it taps for colorless. So either way, I went with Myriad Landscape because if you draw this early, you're going to be able to ramp out your commander faster than you would with Blighted Woodland, and I think that's more important. But yeah, you could also replace Castle Garenbrig with Blighted Woodland and have double the acceleration. I don't think that's a great idea, but it's much more inexpensive. We've also got Temple of the False God. Not everyone likes this land, but I think it works perfectly for the power level of decks that I build. It's an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana, like Soul Ring. It's a soul land. We just can't activate it at all unless we have at least 4 other lands in play, so 5 or more lands, including itself. So if your opening hand is just a mountain and a Temple of the False God, obviously you want to mulligan that. But you kind of want to mulligan in this deck and find yourself some acceleration no matter what for your opening hand. So Temple of the False God, because so much of our acceleration is land-based, even if we have it and we can't use it right away, we're going to be able to play it and use it very early, much more early than turn 5 oftentimes. And then it's acceleration because it's 1 land drop that produces 2 mana without costing us other lands like a bounce land would. Yeah, great. Karplusan Forest is next. This is a pain land. This is the same thing as our Talisman we saw earlier. Taps for colorless, or we can tap for colored mana that causes it to do a damage to us. That's totally fine. It's good flexibility. It can be upgraded to that Stomping Ground if we want to. Maybe we don't take any damage, but I think it's very inexpensive and it gives us everything we need, and we really don't care about that damage if it's happening to us. Karplusan Forest really helps a lot. Next up is Crag Crown Pathway. I love the pathways. They're so flexible. This is only about $3. It's one of the cheaper pathways at the moment, so I think worth running. This is a land that comes in untapped and taps for red. Unless we play it on its backside as Timber Crown Pathway, and then it comes in untapped and taps for green. Really nice for us. A really great, like I mentioned, flexible way to give us exactly the color of mana we may need whenever we play it. Game Trail is next. This is a reveal land. It taps for red or green, but as it enters, we can reveal a mountain or forest card from our hand, and if we don't, we put it on the battlefield tapped. So if this is in our opening hand, we just treat this like a tap land if we want to. Totally fine. If we've got this in our opening hand and we have any other mountain or forest in our hand, we can play this as an untapped dual land. Very strong for us whenever we get it into play like that, especially because we have 23 or so cards in our library that are mountains or forests. So Game Trail, very strong for us. If you wanted to upgrade it, I would say something like Thornspire Verge. One of the Verge lands would be great, but a lot more expensive. Temple of Abandon is our scry land. It is a tap land that makes red or green, and when it enters, we scry one. Great. That's all it takes. It gives us a consistent scry as opposed to the inconsistent but repeatable scry we might get from Path of Ancestry, and that's just solid. You can upgrade this to Commercial District, the Surveil land, which again is a typed dual, and it surveils instead of scrying, which may be more relevant to us. I think scrying, in this case, actually may be better, because we don't have a lot of recursion from our graveyard, but we do have a way to say, oh, this land, or this card that's on top of our library is a creature. I don't want to draw it before I get a chance to attack with my commander and just sneak it into play. So instead, I'm going to scry it to the bottom, and at least I know that one's still in my library for me to find with my commander later. So yeah, either way. Cinderglade, I was right, is our Tango land. For anyone who remembers me commenting on Cinderglade earlier on, that's what I meant by I was right. This is another dual-type land. It taps for red or green because it's a mountain and a forest, and it comes in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. This is a really cool effect. If we have 2 or more basic lands in play, and we use Sky Shroud Claim to find Cinderglade, Cinderglade will come in untapped, because it'll enter tapped unless we control 2 or more basics. Sky Shroud Claim doesn't put the lands it finds into play tapped on their own. It just finds 2 forests for us, and this is a forest. But we can't put this in untapped if we only control 1 basic land and use Sky Shroud Claim to find a basic forest and Cinderglade, since that basic forest that Sky Shroud Claim finds won't be in play already when Cinderglade enters. It enters at the same time as Cinderglade. Cinderglade will come in tapped in that case. But nice little way for us to get in an untapped duel with one of our fetches, or one of our land tutors, that is, with our explosive vegetation. So yeah, a good addition to the deck. We are running both of the typed duels from Dominaria United and Kaldheim. They are identical to each other. They are just tap lands that have the basic types, which means we can search them up with Farseek and Sky Shroud Claim if we want to. And yeah, just get them into play. They'll come in tapped, and we've got our mana fixed. The only difference between them is Wooded Ridgeland is a regular mountain forest. Highland Forest is a snowland mountain forest. It's not relevant at all on our deck, but it's Elena Danner art, so totally worth running. Yeah. Again, this is Jinhao Bai's art, and it's beautiful too. I actually really like this myself, so yeah, both worth it. And if you're gonna upgrade these, you could of course upgrade these to Shocklands, the same way you could do with the Tangle Land, I suppose. They might be the first place to start upgrading, since all of these other dual lands that we can upgrade, have their own uses. They do something more than just be a tap land. But yeah, good options for you. These are very inexpensive still as well. Finally, we have these 6 utility lands. Bonder's Enclave goes in any deck like this one, because it's an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 3 and tap it to draw a card, but only if we have a ferocious creature, a creature with power 4 or greater. So how often is this deck going to run out of steam? In my experience, not that often, but when it does, we're going to have a big creature in play, and we'll need a mana sink of some sort. Even if we still have plenty of play, we might have more mana than we have things to spend it on, and a mana sink that draws us cards, yeah, that'll work great for us. I run Demolition Field in most of my decks, because even though in the pods that my decks are built for, land destruction is frowned upon, Demolition Field is not permanent land destruction, so to speak, and you need to have, in any case, an answer to a threat. That's how Magic works. Sometimes a threat looks like a big creature, but other times it looks like a land, a non-basic land, that's empowering your opponent too much, or preventing you from doing your thing. Maybe they're running a Glacial Chasm and you're not able to do good damage to them with your big combat deck. Maybe they're running a Rogue's Passage and their Voltron commander is doing way too much damage to you and you can't block it. Demolition Field is the best answer to that, in my opinion, if you're only going to have one answer and it's in your land base, and it's not going to be that objectionable in the deck, the pods that we're talking about. So this is a land that comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. That opponent then gets to search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither we nor they are down a land. We just have basics in play instead of our Demolition Field and their problematic non-basic, and we answered their threat. That's the only people that are going to be unhappy with you answering their threat would be unhappy with any answer of any threat. So even at a table that frowns on land destruction, this is not mana denial, because unless of course they didn't have any basics left in their library, in which case that's okay. Sometimes that's how it goes. Yeah, Demolition Field I think is the most fair way of dealing with problematic non-basics, even at the lowest levels of tables or the lowest brackets or tiers of play. I don't want to denigrate them. I think playing this kind of deck is really fun, and it's the core for a reason. This is what Commander is sort of intended to be. But that's another video. Next up is Kessig Wolfrun. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay X, a red and a green, and tap it to give a creature plus X plus O and trample until end of turn. Lots of fun things to note about this. The first is X can be 0. So we just pay a red, a green, and tap this, to give a creature trample. It gets plus O, but trample. So that's just adding trample to something. But if we need a mana sink, well, we can sink an awful lot of mana into making one of our creatures bigger and giving them trample, and thereby doing more damage. But Kessig Wolfrun does not say target creature you control. So we can throw this at an opponent's creature and say, look, I know you want to trample in, but our opponent, like opponent A, you're attacking opponent B, and you want to be able to get in, but they keep chump blocking you. If you will leave me alone for a turn cycle, or give me something in return, whatever it may be, I'll activate my Kessig Wolfrun and give your big creature trample. And they'll be like, oh, wow, yeah, that sounds like a good plan. I will happily do that. Alternatively, we could use Kessig Wolfrun on an opponent's creature without making a deal with them. Maybe opponent A attacks opponent B, and it's a difficult block, and they're in this situation where opponent B is just barely going to survive. Then we activate Kessig Wolfrun prior to combat damage, pump up one of the opponent A's creatures, and now that creature is huge and has trample, and all the math that went into the blocks that opponent B made goes out the window. And maybe that we've just used our mana and a different opponent's creature to kill another opponent. Pretty sweet. Mosswort Bridge is next. Actually, let's talk about Rogue's Passage first, because it works in the same space as Kessig Wolfrun in this deck. It's an untapped land that taps for colorless, but we can also pay for and tap it to make a creature unblockable this turn. As with Kessig Wolfrun, oftentimes we're going to use this on our own creatures, especially our commander, because our commander is 7 power. 7 power means 3 hits from our commander and our opponent dies of commander damage. Pretty great. Making our commander unblockable also makes them difficult to remove with blockers. Blockers can kill our creatures if they can block. But if we use Rogue's Passage, they can't block. And it's expensive to activate this ability, but what we get out of it in certain instances is totally worth it. Similarly, we can use this politically and make an opponent's creature unblockable in exchange for a kickback, or we can make an opponent's creature unblockable without needing to make a deal because we want their creature to do damage to another opponent. We just do that after they've attacked with it. Because it's worth mentioning, and I always say this when I include Rogue's Passage in my videos, if we make a deal with an opponent and we say, I'll make your commander, let's say, unblockable if you attack opponent B, they might say, great, go ahead and do it. We say, you need to attack first before we make it unblockable. Because if you don't, it will be unblockable to anyone and you could attack us with it and we wouldn't be able to block. We don't want that. But we can activate it prior to blockers once you've declared it as an attacker, so you need to do that. And if they're not willing to make that deal, that's okay. But most of the time, if someone's making a deal, they recognize that one person's going out on a limb in order to see if it pays off. And we don't mind being the honorable player in this case because we're going to beat them with commander damage, not with tricks and lies at the table. Yeah. So Kessig Wolfrun and Rogue's Passage both work in a similar space in our deck, as do Mosswort Bridge and Spinerock Knoll. So these are hideaway lands. They come in tapped, and they both have Hideaway 4, which we've seen Hideaway before, but this means we look at the top 4 cards of our library and exile one face down under this bridge, and then put the rest on the bottom in a random order. It comes in tapped, but Mosswort Bridge taps for green when it's untapped, or if we control creatures that have a total power of 10 or greater, we can pay a green and tap the bridge to be able to play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. That's how we get this out from under Hideaway. So a sweet way to get a bonus spell in addition to just playing a tapped green source. The same is true of Spinerock Knoll for red mana with Hideaway 4, comes in tapped, but we have to pay a red and tap it to play that card, but we don't care about how much power our creatures have. We only care that an opponent was dealt 7 or more damage this turn. This is nice because it's easy for us to do that 7 damage. Remember, our commander is a 7 power creature, but it also doesn't say if you dealt an opponent 7 or more damage this turn. So as long as an opponent took 7 or more damage, we can tap Spinerock Knoll, pay a red, and play whatever's exiled under this on an opponent's turn, assuming that's when another opponent took that damage. Even if an opponent does 7 damage to themselves, which sometimes will happen, we can play something from out from under Spinerock Knoll, and that's pretty surprising and a lot of fun. So there you go. And that about sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new TMNT Commander decks every Thursday through mid-April when Secrets of Strixhaven drops, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or deck style. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Consider becoming a member of the channel. And remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.